It's very rainy today, so
Okay.
I need some waterproof.
No, I'm doing the line. I'm the talent, you're the director. Welcome to Glasgow, where it rains a lot. But I actually don't have any waterproof clothes.
I wanted to see all of it.
I want to test the idea of patchworking waterproof fabrics with a simple garment, the poncho. At its simplest, it's just two rectangles of material where the short end is joined to the long to create a loop. Once I have a pattern that I like, I'll join sections of deconstructed rain jackets and add seam tape. Details will include a 3-panel hood, an armhole, and a zip on the shoulder so that the garment can be worn like a cape.
Okay, materials. I have 3 beautiful, very plasticky rain jackets. They're all made from the same material. This is polyester coated in polyurethane. And it's an interesting material. It's got a wee bit of stretch in one direction. And the plastic coating should mean that these are entirely waterproof. Something we shall test properly later. The other thing I got was this. This is waterproof seam tape. I've got 10 meters of it. I am worried that that's not enough. The other thing I'm worried about is that you have to apply this with heat. And I'm fairly certain that this material is going to react very poorly to the iron. I will have to figure out something clever about this. But first of all, as always, patterning. And I'll throw the pattern, oh, there we go. That is a poncho pattern. That's what I'm starting with. But I was having a bit of trouble like visualizing how this would work and how it would wrap around the body. So I made this. Do you want to see? Little guy. It's a little maquette. And that got me thinking, what if I actually made use of some of these toys behind me?
This is Hanya Boy by Mau Licinius, and he's gonna be our model today. I take a note of all his relevant measurements and put him to one side while I draft a couple of patterns. The first is a rectangle. The width is the measurement from the neck to the elbow, and the length is that plus half the circumference of the neck. The second builds on this pattern and is inspired by British Army rain capes. By cutting this part off the pattern and putting it on the other side, I'll move the seam into the body. Lastly, I draft a full body block because I want to try and draft a more fitted design, which was a total fail. The other two fared better, but in this scale the fabric doesn't drape, and we end up with a very sculptural look. The best is definitely the twisted seam, and after a quick mod to add a shoulder line, I think this is the pattern to develop. Although I'll have to extend the drop significantly if I actually want to stay dry. I unpick the maquette and copy the final shape. And after a bit of footering and cutting, I get these 4 panels. Alright, look, if you're enjoying this, and that's a pretty big if. But if you are, why not subscribe? These videos are only going to get weirder. The full-scale pattern starts with my body block. Watch this film to draft your own. And from this, I take the centre, collar, and shoulder lines. I strike a line from the centre top out to where the side seam would meet the drop. This will be where the front joins the sides, and from the end of the shoulder, I strike out at 45 degrees to the centre line. I mark the distance from my neck to below the elbow and draft in the bottom edge. In the end, I decide to move the joining seam away from the curve, and I can cut a toile. This guy hasn't noticed the nipply points on the shoulders and is very pleased with himself. This is the fabric I have to work with. I start placing scraps over the pattern while keeping in mind that I'll need 4 of each scrap to make up 2 of these cut on the fold panels. After much consideration, I have this layout, these sketches, a finished pattern, most of my panels cut, and these scraps to make the back. Off camera, I test the joining process assembling the back. Each panel is joined with a straight stitch. This seam was pressed open, but most were just pressed to one side. The seam allowance is top stitched down, then seam tape is cut to length, positioned and fused in place with the iron. This was repeated.
Just want to jump in and talk about this. This is baking paper. This is what I used to protect the garment while I was ironing. Oh my God, it's so rustly though, isn't it? What I've done is I've folded mine up so that I have 2 thick layers, and in between those I have a channel. And in that channel, that's where the seam tape is. So that basically means that I can maximize the amount of heat that goes through to the seam tape, but minimize the amount of heat that goes onto the actual fabric. Pretty clever, right? Anyway, shall we see me finish this ridiculous garment? I'd like to see it finished too. It's not done yet. It's still not done yet.
I now have 4 finished panels ready for construction. I quickly trim the additional back panel to size and then focus on adding the side zip. I trim the zip to length, then try to figure out how I'm going to centre the zip on the seam line. I have 8mm of seam allowance, it's 12mm between the raw edge of the zip track and the side of the slider, and honestly I have no idea what I'm doing. I cut and hope for the best. I edge stitch the zip into place, fold it back, top stitch, and I miss the mark. I unpick, go again, and this time it's right-ish. I clean up the edge on the side panel and add it with the same process. In the end, I've added about 2mm to the seam allowance on both sides, but I mark the new centre point and join as before, hoping this won't affect the shape too much. Now I need to do something to stop the slider from going off the end of the track and generally strengthen this area. I end up cutting a little square, sewing down one edge, sewing it on over the zip track right sides together with the edges turned in, sewing again above the zip track and then folding it over and securing the sides in place, having not realised that I was using the panel where I'd put on a bird's nest. Anyway, after a good night's sleep, I clean up the edges on the rest of the panels and join them all. I can now add the shoulder seam and I have the main body of the Space Priest poncho.
We are getting to an ending. I just need a minute. That zip was a lot, and it's not the only one in the garment. Overall, I am quite happy with how this is going. It's ridiculous, don't get me wrong. I know that this is a ridiculous thing that I'm making, but I quite like it. And if it works, if it keeps me dry, it won't be ridiculous. The thing that we do have a problem with is that the neck has gotten a bit smaller. There's been a lot of trimming along the way. Some of my patterns didn't work out as well as they should have. I'm not entirely sure why. But what's coming next is we're going to make a hood, and I'm going to have like a little zippy bit at the front, which means that there's a zip going into here and there's no seam allowance here. I don't really know what the plan is, but maybe the voiceover guy knows.
I do have a plan, it's just not great. First, I drop the centre front of the neckline to give me a bit more space. I then trace the shape of the neckline, marking the various seams. I'll spare you the drafting of this pattern because it's very, very wrong. Something I would have known if I'd taken 15 minutes to make a toile, but I rushed into making the pattern pieces and cutting the panels. Construction started with sewing this little tube, cutting it in half and positioning each tube on the end of the zip track as little stoppers. I added the front collar panels right sides together, giving me this little assembly that I'll finish with top stitching once it's joined to the body. The 2 lining panels are joined right sides together and the front trim is added. The 3 panels of the outer hood are joined and top stitched, but I don't add seam tape because I don't have the tools needed to do it properly. The lining and the shell are joined with the zipper assembly sandwiched between them, and once turned out, I have the finished hood. From here on, things go really wrong, so this
That edit did get a bit intense. It's just how I'm feeling about this garment. I have been working on it pretty solidly for about 6 weeks. It's taken its toll. So much of it I am really, really proud of, but specifically when I figured out that I was going to add these little triangles. These allowed me to use the panels from the donor jackets and actually fill the gaps between them where there just wasn't enough material, and it adds like totally this sci-fi aesthetic that I was going for, this solar punk idea that I'm really trying to sew for. But so much of it did go kind of wrong. And it's all down to this, the hood. Because I didn't fit it, because I didn't actually cut a toile, see if it worked, I ended up pushing ahead. There's too much material in the sides, and there's far too much material in the back of the hood here, so it just makes me look like a cone head. Massively disappointing. The only way that this garment was going to be wearable was if it was entirely functional. If you're going to make something that makes you look like such a prick, you should be wearing it because it's actually doing its job. It's not a wet weather garment, it's just an aesthetic thing, and that's an aesthetic too far for the west coast of Scotland. A lesson learned, hopefully. Hopefully this is the last time we'll be getting to the end of a project where I'm like, I should have made a toile. I'm really hitting up against this thing, this like gap between my skills and my experience and my taste, the things I want. And I think for a while, I'm probably going to do some simpler, lower stakes projects. But I do think this is a valid approach, but we do need to do one final test. We need to see if this is actually waterproof.
I asked my wife, who knows these things, to take me to a waterfall, and she over-delivered. However, the poncho did perform, both keeping me dry in the drizzle and helping me stay cool once I had built up a bit of a sweat. However, there was no way I was getting myself under that, but I didn't come all this way to stay dry. The poncho does now need a wash, so why not revive a dead meme? And yeah, it's not waterproof. I could maybe blame forgetting how my shower works, but the real problem was the complex curved seams where I haven't added the seam tape. So yes, you can make waterproof patchwork. You just have to do it better than me.
Anyway, that is the end of the story of this garment. Thank you so much for watching this far. I hope you got something out of it. I do think that you can take some of the things that I was learning along the way on this project and apply it to your garments and make yourself something cool with this technique. I will try this again, but not for a while. What is coming up? I fixed the collar on one of my cowboy shirts, so that's getting edited at the moment. There's only like a minute's worth of sewing in that, so I'm gonna have to come up with something else to make it like a full video. I have been procrastinating on the next like big project. I'm trying to make a pair of curtains. You'll find out when the video comes out. And after that, I've got a lot of ideas and a lot of things. I'm done. Right, see you later. All right, my back. I put my back out, by the way. Oh.